Welcome to The Explainer. Today we're diving into what's basically a political thriller from the Philippines. Get this, an entire city's leadership, a mayor's whole career, and the stability of a government all came down to how you define a single word. This is a story where timing wasn't just important, it was literally everything. So just imagine this for a second. You've just won a huge election. You've barely had time to figure out where the coffee machine is in your new office, and before your first year is even up, there's already a movement to kick you out. Well, that exact question was at the very heart of a massive legal fight for the mayor of a major city in the Philippines.
Okay, so let's get specific, because this isn't some hypothetical. We are in Pasay City, and this is where a brand new mayor found himself in exactly that spot, fighting to keep his job almost as soon as he got it, in a battle that would go all the way to the Supreme Court.
This timeline right here is absolutely crucial, so let's walk through it together. Look at that first date. Mayor Claudio takes office on July 1st, 1998. Okay, now check this out. The group trying to get rid of him holds a meeting on May 29th, 1999. That's clearly inside his first year, right? But then, and this is the real kicker, the official paperwork, the petition, isn't filed until July 2nd, 1999. That's 1 year and one single day after he took office. And that tiny little gap, it created a huge legal mess. You see, this whole fight boils down to just one specific line in the Philippines local government code. It's a rule that's supposed to give newly elected officials, a little bit of breathing room. Now, when you first read this, it seems pretty straightforward, doesn't it? No recall shall take place within 1 year. Simple. You get a 1-year grace period. But that simple little sentence ended up creating this massive legal puzzle for the Supreme Court. And why? Because everything, and I mean everything, hinged on the definition of just one word in that sentence. That right there was the million-dollar question. Does the word recall mean the entire process starting from the very first meeting? Or does it only mean the very end of that process, the actual recall election itself? And just like that, two completely different ways of reading that single word went head-to-head in court, and the fate of a whole city's leadership was just hanging in the balance.
All right, let's really break this down. On one side, you have Mayor Claudio. His argument was pretty simple. Recall is a process. It's the whole shebang. And that process started with that meeting on May 29th, which was inside the 1-year ban. Therefore, the whole thing's illegal, end of story. But then you have his opponents and the Commission on Elections, or COMELEC. They argued that no, recall just means the final election. All those earlier meetings, that's just prep work. In their view, the legal clock didn't start ticking until the petition was officially filed on July 2nd, which was safely after the 1-year ban was over.
So, who was right? The city's leadership was just stuck in limbo, and everybody was waiting for the country's highest court to finally make the call. And in what was, wow, a super close decision, by a vote of just 8-6, the Supreme Court sided with the Recall Assembly and COMELEC. The final verdict? The recall effort was totally valid and it could go forward. So what's really interesting is how the court explained its thinking. They had this 3-part logic. First, they focused on voter power. They said the ultimate power of recall belongs to the voters, and that power is used on election day. So the ban applies to the election itself, not the meetings leading up to it. Second, they looked at the goal of the ban. The whole point of that 1-year grace period is to give voters time to judge an official's performance. And where does that final judgment happen? At the ballot box. And third, and this is a huge one, they brought up free speech. They argued that telling citizens they can't even meet to talk about a recall in that first year would violate their basic constitutional rights. But hold on, the story isn't over. Remember that razor-thin 8-6 vote? Well, there was a really powerful dissenting opinion written by Justice Reynaldo S. Puno, who basically argued the majority had just made a very dangerous mistake. Justice Puno argued that the majority's interpretation completely missed the whole point of the 1-year ban. He saw it as a crucial period of repose, basically a timeout from politics, to let a newly elected leader actually govern for a bit. So what was the dissent so afraid of? It was this. If you let recall efforts start from day one, you're pretty much creating a permanently hostile political environment. Just think about it. The new leader never gets a fair chance to govern without being distracted. It encourages constant, ugly, and expensive political fights. And it puts officials in a position where they're always looking over their shoulder, playing politics to survive instead of focusing on their actual job. The dissent was essentially warning that the majority's decision had just opened the door to chaos.
Now, this case might be decades old, but the precedent it set continues to shape local politics in the Philippines to this very day. It's a big deal.
What this case really does is highlight this fundamental tug of war in a democracy. On one side, you've got the people's right to hold their leaders accountable, and on the other, you have the government's need for stability to actually get things done. By defining recall as the election itself, the court drew a very clear starting line, and it's a line that definitely favors early and open challenges from citizens.
And that's really the big question this whole case leaves us with, isn't it? Does this ruling truly empower people with a tool for accountability, or does it just open the door to political chaos? It just goes to show you how the interpretation of a single word can completely define the rules of power, shaping that delicate dance between the people and the leaders they choose. And that is a debate that is far, far from over.